You know, in a way, it kind of breaks my heart that it really does keep falling down on racial lines. Wealthy white Louisiana residents win right to split from Baton Rouge and form their own city. That's right, St. George has been born. Wealthy white residents were upset over violence, and they said, we want to form our own school district, basically leading to the creation of their own new city, which is 70% white. And I don't know that the people who petitioned this were thinking that they wanted a white racial enclave, but it seems like this is just how things will keep breaking down. The left, their answers to these problems are to make them worse. And so it is really sad. But I can't blame the people who voted for this. I can't blame the people who are wondering why all this violence is breaking out and demanding action, not getting it, and then deciding we'll make our own. What are they accused of? Racism, of course. You take a look over at our good friend Chicago. That is from where I originate. And it's racially segregated, like extremely racially segregated. Everybody knows this. Where I grew up in the Garfield Ridge area, or Midway, they're slightly separate, but we call it Midway because where the airport is. I was 2 blocks from Midway Airport in Chicago. Look it up on the map. If you traveled 2 blocks north of my location on 49th Street to 47th Street, 47th was where if you crossed it, everyone was black, and south of it, mostly white, probably like 70%, a lot of Polish immigrants, but there was some Hispanic and black as well, some Asian, but mostly white. And but crossing 47th Street, everybody knew that put you in a squarely 99% black neighborhood. If you traveled eastward towards Cicero Avenue, when you crossed Cicero, you were in the Hispanic neighborhood where all the advertisements turned Spanish. It is that racially segregated. Big Cicero Avenue, I think it's like, what is it? It might be like 6 lanes. It's a big road where I grew up, Archer and Cicero. And you cross it, and all of a sudden, everyone speaks Spanish. It's mostly Hispanic. You take a look at the voting patterns, and you can see that by neighborhood, it's really fascinating. You look at the neighborhoods and who they voted for in the mayoral election: the black candidate, the white candidate, or the Latino candidate. And then you take a look at the racial demographics of those neighborhoods, and they voted based on race. There you go. There are deep ties between race and culture. It's not absolute, but they exist. Like the Latino candidate speaks Spanish. The white neighborhoods mostly don't. So, of course, speaking Spanish is going to give you a cultural tie that other peoples don't have. This is how it breaks down. I suppose the goal is, how do we overcome this and have a unified culture? But I think people are first layer thinkers overwhelmingly, and that results in people wanting to be near people who look like them, I guess. Let's read this story, and I'll tell you about the secession. And I think we're going to see more of this, actually. How Baton Rouge school, plagued by racial tensions and violence, drove military veteran to spearhead successful campaign for wealthy white residents to form the new city of St. George. On May 3rd, 2013, violence erupted in the hallways of Woodlawn High School. As many as 6 separate fights between unruly students broke out that day, part of an annus horribilis that saw 61 arrests made at the racially diverse school in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Looking on in despair was Norman Browning, who had recently spent 15 years volunteering as a sports coach in Woodlawn. It was to be a pivotal day in the history of the school, the city, and ultimately America, as it helped drive a seismic split in the community led by Browning that sparked fears over the resegregation of nation's schools. The Louisiana Supreme Court last week ruled that the new city of St. George could move forward with incorporation, splitting wealthy white residents from the poor black residents of East Baton Rouge. Now, ultimately, I don't think these people are motivated by race. I don't think this guy here, Browning, was sitting there complaining about white and non-white people. I think he was talking about violent crime. He was talking about wealth and I don't even think he was probably talking about wealth. He's probably just saying, like, look, we've got families here who want to have their own school system and don't want to have their kids surrounded by this violence. And then it all breaks down on racial lines. The poorer areas split from the wealthier areas. It has been hailed by supporters as a final victory in a 10-year campaign to take back control of the area's failing education system. But opponents have slammed it as racist secession, arguing it will create a white enclave and leave struggling black communities behind. Now, hold on there a minute. That's a bold thing to say. To make the claim that a suburb forming and starting their own school district will harm black people as if to imply that black people can't run their own schools? No. Hold on. What does this have? What does their new school have to do with the old school system? How will they be left behind, being left to their own devices in their own city? That's racist. The implication being they need the wealthy white people in order to help them advance? How dare they say such a thing? I mean, seriously, I'm half kidding, but like, come on, really? The Daily Mail can reveal how the split was sparked by Browning's time at Woodlawn High, a school that became a lightning rod for a community riven by racial tensions. The military veteran and father of three is bred Baton Rouger, educated at Baton Rouge High School, which lies within East Baton Rouge. Outside of the new city of St. George, he graduated from Southeastern Louisiana University. After leaving the military, he worked predominantly in pharmaceutical sales outside the state. In the late 90s, he accepted the offer to pursue his passion of sports coaching as a volunteer at Woodlawn High. The school was founded in 1949, 7 years before desegregation. In those days, it was all white. By the time Browning joined, more than half the students were black. This was a point of pride for many within the school who celebrated its diversity, including its mixed football team and orchestras. But over the past few decades, Baton Rouge public schools have started to struggle, plagued by ill discipline and falling grades. Woodlawn High, which is around 1,400 students, currently has a C-letter grade. But most disturbing is the extensive record of violent incidents, many of which have been filmed by pupils and uploaded to YouTube. Just last year, local news site WBRZ aired disturbing footage of a series of fights. One shows a pupil dragging another to the playground before punching him repeatedly in the face. Another, around a half dozen students, hurling haymakers at each other in the hallway. Some of the brawls appeared to be fought along racial lines. Responding to the incidents, Korhanda Corley, a parental advocate for the NAACP, cited escalating racial tensions. She highlighted anger among some black parents that discipline was being targeted at their children while others were getting away scot-free. The school, for its part, said it had thoroughly investigated the incidents and had taken the actions recommended by its handbook. So I'm going to pause here. All right. Isn't that a good thing? If you're a black parent seeing white kids getting away with starting fights, don't you want them taken out of your school system? The idea then that there would be people claiming it's racist and will leave black families behind is insane. How? You're claiming the white kids are starting fights and getting away with it. Fine. They can be pulled off into their own school, as they should be. If a kid is at school who keeps starting fights, you take that kid out of the school. I don't see where the problem is or why it's racist that these people are leaving. I also do think it's funny. Here you have this image from the Daily Mail, and they're like St. George on the right, and it's like a Google Maps picture of a suburb, and then on the left, they intentionally take a picture of a pothole. Oh, come on. Are you kidding me? Poor Triple S Food Mart. Why are you singling them out? I'm sure Baton Rouge has nice stuff in their city. They say, but its staff has not covered themselves in glory. A few months after the WBRZ report, an assistant principal at the school was placed on leave after a CCTV video showed him leading a student down the hall before slamming him to the ground and choking him. Jeez. In 2020, a white teacher was placed on leave after sharing several allegedly racist posts, including one that claimed Kamala Harris had only been picked because of the color of her skin. I'm going to pause right now and say, what? Racist? Joe Biden said he was going to do that. That he said he was. How is that racist? These people are nuts. Parents were losing faith. Nothing is being resolved by the school system, Corley said. This was a conclusion shared by many white middle-class parents. But while their diagnosis was the same, the solution would drive a wedge between the community. In 2012, they proposed creating a new Southeast Community School District, but couldn't marshal the two-thirds majority. So the following summer, they came back with a different approach, create their own city. The move sparked national media coverage. See these children here, he said, pointing to the smattering of youths within the hall. That's why we're here. East Baton Rouge has failed our children for 30 plus years. Browning's thirst for military discipline is immediately clear. My involvement with this campaign really stems from what I saw on the inside of Woodlawn, the lack of control in the classrooms, the lack of control in the halls. A local 225 magazine feature from the same year described him as a man who tends to stand or pace when he's explaining something with bullet point sentences propelled with a pointed finger and one arched eyebrow. Browning told the magazine that students are running the schools in Baton Rouge, explaining how pupils can get literally nose to nose with the teacher to curse them out without the threat of disciplinary action. He told PBS that the order instilled in schools during the time as a pupil had fallen apart, adding that years of busing following the Brown ruling had destroyed the sense of community. But he denied accusation that his desire for a breakaway city was racially motivated. Yes, I've been called a racist in no uncertain terms. I'm not a racist. I can't, I'm not going to try to attempt to defend it. What I do is let my actions speak, and how I conduct myself and how I treat people to speak. Look, is it racist? Here's the question. Is it racist for Hispanic people to keep choosing to live by Hispanic people in Chicago? Is it racist for black people in Chicago to keep trying to move into homes near black people? I don't think so. I don't think that the individual actions themselves are racist, but it is a trend, and the avalanche doesn't blame itself for the snowflake doesn't blame itself for the avalanche. So what do you do? How do you solve for something like that? I don't think you do. I think the reality is in Chicago, there is a black community, and many people talk about black culture. Well, for those reasons, people are going to want to live near each other. They want to share in culture. Me, I'd like to live near people who play music and skateboard because then we can play music and skateboard together. It has nothing to do with their race. But however, there are communities centered largely around their racial traditions. I shouldn't say racial traditions, but tied to where they were in the world, what they've built, and who is around them. So people who speak Spanish are going to want to be around people who speak Spanish. That means you're going to get a lot of Latinos. White people are going to go want to play golf, and they're going to live next to people, live near people who play golf. Is that racist? So now the issue is, if the people of St. George who have seceded and formed their own city want their own school, why is that racist? They're not saying no black people allowed. They're saying we wanted a new school district where we can fix the rules and fix the schools. And they say that's going to hurt black families. That is the weirdest argument I've ever heard. But I would say that is racist. Denying this city its right for its residents to have a school in their area with rules they want, that's called democracy. And they say, yeah, but it's mostly white. So what? 70% white. Now, what I do find interesting is that you can see there's like a pocket here, and there's portions that don't appear to be Baton Rouge or St. George. I don't know what that is necessarily. But interestingly, as per the ruling, apparently any business or I don't know how they broke it down, but properties that were on the border of the annexation were allowed to choose St. George or Baton Rouge, and many chose Baton Rouge, and the St. George residents tried to stop that from happening, but saying it wasn't done legally, and people want to be in Baton Rouge, they can be in Baton Rouge, they want to be in St. George, they can be in St. George. This city appears to have effectively split in half. Now, they were saying that East Baton Rouge was basically unincorporated anyway, and it was just a part of Baton Rouge, or I don't know how that breaks down. But now it's basically just its own suburb. I wonder if that is basically taking away a large tax base from Baton Rouge. They say it's going to harm black families. No, it's going to harm poor families, I guess. But you don't have a right to subjugate people and make them your slaves. If someone the way I see it with Eastern Oregon, mostly Trump-supporting conservative, but Portland is subjugating them. I say if they want to vote and leave, they have every right to do so. Here's the problem. Portland is not going to allow, Portland, Eugene, et cetera, they're not going to allow what is effectively tax slaves to leave the state. These are people who have no say in government. They have a say, sure, but no one listens, and they don't have the political power to push back and defend themselves, and their taxes are taken from them. So, of course, Portland is never going to let them go. A political minority that can't do anything to protect themselves. Hence why I'm a big fan of the Electoral College, mind you. I will say this is fascinating and indicative of where we're at, and this is just the beginning. You have a county in northern Colorado wanting to break off and join Wyoming. You have northern California wanting to form its own state or join with the state of Jefferson or Greater Idaho. Eastern Oregon wants to break off and join Idaho and make Greater Idaho. There's an argument that there could be one new state called the state of Jefferson, which would take parts of Oregon, Washington, and Northern California. I think we have to do it. I think you have to. I think this is the only way to solve these problems, is allow large groups of people who want to self-govern to self-govern. If you force people to be under a political rule where they can't change anything, but there's a large faction of them, you get conflict. Here we can see the people of St. George were under Baton Rouge control, so they said, we're going to break away. And they succeeded. Now they can make the rules as they see fit, and you can choose which city you want to live in. See, the issue is for Baton Rouge, they're thinking, we're in control. We get all the money. If that section breaks off, we lose that money. That's too bad. It's not your labor. You don't get to just own it. So I wonder if this will spread and what it means for many other jurisdictions, especially if this gets appealed to a higher court or how it ultimately breaks down. I think it's fair to say there are many places that would want to do something just like this and probably will start to do so. I mean, look, growing up in Chicago and seeing the pure racial segregation and the cultural differences, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. The interesting thing is this is very reminiscent of St. Louis County, how people who lived, it was mainly white people who lived in St. Louis, started moving out because and this was very much motivated by race. Crime and poverty played a big factor, but at different times back then. White people started leaving and forming their own cities and saying, we just don't want to be, we don't want people moving in that are going to cause us problems. You call it white flight and you call it racist. And my response, honestly, I don't care. If people want to form a community to live somewhere where they feel safe and successful, they have every right to do so. I think it is sad. It's unfortunate that it really breaks down by race in many circumstances. I wish it wasn't that way. But you recently had, I think this was even in Louisiana, I'm not sure, it might have been Alabama. Probably neither, I don't know. There was the Black Lives Matter activists who raised money and wanted to create their own black city. And where were the complaints of racism and segregation and all that? Unfortunately, I think there's a reality in this country. And it's that people choose to live near the race that they are. What do? You call them racist, but I don't believe people like this are consciously saying they don't want to live near insert person of certain race. I think ultimately it breaks down on racial lines due to differences in cultures, cultural clashes, and conflict arising out of these things, as well as poverty. And for a lot of people, yeah, racism for sure. But what comes next? How many more cities will do this? How many more states? Perhaps that is the answer to the conflict that we are facing. Or perhaps it just makes things worse, right? You had many people flee New York. They left Manhattan Island. I think it was 250,000 people left Manhattan Island, maybe more. I think it was like 500,000 when COVID happened, and they went to other states. Many said, good, it's a good thing because people can live where they want to live and where they feel comfortable. Yes, but that just means you now have two different areas that are diametrically opposed to each other. When you have two areas where there's a mix of politics, they work to get along. If all of the Republicans from one area move to a suburb, now you have deep red and deep blue, and they're going to feud with each other, and that could create escalating problems. It could create effectively gang violence. So there is a challenge with this kind of thing happening in that it could lead to such stark cultural differences. There is conflict and crisis. I'll tell you what I see happening now. Wealthy neighborhood, I don't think it has anything to do with it being a new city. They're going to face an increase in crime. In Illinois, there's an area east of the city that Oak Brook and Oak Brook Terrace. And they have massively high crime despite being relatively small, wealthy suburbs. And the reason they have high crime, people from other parts of the city and suburbs come to their shopping districts to rob people knowing they have money. And so, high crime. They got to have a lot of police, but fortunately, the people who live there like the police. And, either way, the crime is still high. I don't know if it's still high, but it was high, 20 years ago. This was a big problem in the area. So even when you break off and form your own city, you need more than that. East St. Louis, or I'm sorry, East St. George, they're going to have to make a police force and a fire department. They're going to have to do building inspections and a whole lot of things. But first and foremost, they need security. I think now what you'll end up just seeing is, I don't know, another Ahmaud Arbery incident. Someone's going to come from Baton Rouge to rob the wealthy people. A city that is predominantly black, of course, you will have criminals who are going to be black. You're going to have wealthy people in a predominantly white area who are going to be victims. And that's the narrative they're going to push. And then they're going to claim the city is racist. Then it's going to get worse. But hey, man, things just keep trucking along, I suppose, right? This is just one more move in an effort by many people to define the barriers of the cities they live in. And I don't think it's racist to do so. But people always just want to see everything through a racial lens, especially the left. I'll leave it there. Next segment is coming up at 6 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.